Thanks for joining us, everyone. My name is Brian Elaine, and I'm here today with Paul Angone, author of a new book titled Listen to Your Day, The Life-Changing Practice of Paying Attention, which just came out from Baker Books. Paul is one of the nation's most trusted and sought-after voices to young professionals, people going through change and transition, and those looking to live more intentional lives. The best-selling author of 101 Secrets for Your 20s, 101 Questions You Need to Ask in Your 20s, and 25 Lies 20-somethings Need to Stop Believing, Paul is a dynamic keynote speaker at universities, corporations, and churches nationwide. He's also the creator of allgrownup.com. That's grown with an A, not a W, which has been read by millions in 190 different countries, and the All Grown Up podcast. Paul's also an organizational consultant with a master's degree in organizational leadership who specializes in helping companies attract, retain, develop, and harness the best strengths of the millennial and Gen Z generations. He's been honored to work with amazing companies like Intel Security, Wells Fargo, and Aflac through speaking and millennial influencer branding and awareness campaigns. He frequently contributes and has been featured in publications such as Bloomberg, Chicago Tribune, Business Insider, Huffington Post, and many others. You can learn more at allgrownup.com. So that's allgrownup.com. So Paul, it's so great to meet you, and congratulations on all your accomplishments.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's way too long of a bio. It's like, did I do all that? I don't know.
I took it from somewhere. I mean,
yeah, it must be true. I think I lived that.
It's on a website somewhere, so it's got to be true.
No, it's been a wild ride to get to this place, and it's interesting all the different things that start coming your way when you start heading in one direction. So I feel like that's the kind of the life I've been living.
So besides all that, what else would you like people to know about you?
Well, I'm a dad of four, so that's a big part of my life too, with four kids under 12 years old. And so that's what I love about the life of being a writer and a speaker and kind of working for myself, being an entrepreneur really is that flexibility to do life and work kind of all together, and it makes it messy and sometimes it's hard and it's very busy. But to bring kids along the ride, and kind of do it all together with my wife as well, who's edited all my books.
Wow.
Before they make it to a publisher. My wife is the one editing them before anybody else sees them. So it's been a family adventure for sure.
Oh, that's very cool. So before we get into the new book, can you talk a little bit about your previous books? Tell folks about, what they are, how they came about.
Yeah, I think all of my books have really originated from the same place of feeling like I was failing miserably at something and then wanting to do something about it. And that's why I had such a focus on 20-somethings, really just a very specific focus on life in your 20s with my books, 101 Secrets to Your 20s, 101 Questions You Ask in Your 20s, and 25 Lies, 20-somethings You Stop Believing. Because it was such a hard decade of my life. I really felt like I was going to, leave college with good grades, get the right internship, right job, right house, right spouse, make a difference, make a lot of money, all these expectations that are on us. And I think like most of us, we realize pretty quickly that the road is going to be much windier. There's going to be a lot of dead ends, a lot of rejection, failure, and really learning that, what I write about in 101 Secrets to Your 20s, that the possibility for greatness and embarrassment both exist in the same space. So it's really hard to do anything great in this world if you're not completely willing to embarrass yourself in the process. So I had to learn a lot of those principles. And then as I would talk about it with other people, they'd be like, oh man, Mike, this has been really hard for me too. And where are the books for this? Where's the help? Where's the syllabus now on how to navigate all of this? And so that's why I spent really 10 years of my writing career just writing books, really trying to speak to that time of life. And really it's for people going through transition and change, but it's just a unique season of transition and change where you're making all these major life decisions as kind of everything is swirling out from underneath you.
Well, there was an important point in my life where I finally realized that, if I try something new and the worst thing that can happen is that it looks stupid, it doesn't work. And I said to myself, well, if that's the worst thing that can happen, who cares?
Yeah.
But I had to kind of cross that threshold mentally because I'd, obviously grown up in the same, kind of mindset of I didn't want to be embarrassed,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. And especially now with social media and for younger people too, where they don't want to look, they want to look like they have it all together or
Mm,
create some PR campaign almost, we're almost like our own PR agents trying to craft this message that our life is amazing and epic and successful. Um, and so it can have that feeling of, I don't want to look like I'm failing or I'm embarrassing myself. But I often tell everybody, what's the social media page that everybody looks at the most, everybody looks at this page the most on social media, and it's their own. Everybody looks at their own page the most.
yeah,
And nobody really cares that much about what you're doing, and it's almost freeing. Sometimes it can feel like, oh, why don't people care more? And it's like, well, they care about what they're doing more, and
sure.
so it kind of frees you up if once you kind of grapple with that. You're like, nobody really cares that much. I might have my mom call me and worried and say, I'm worried you're gonna be living in a box under a bridge, but other than that, I can take those risks, strategic risks, and that's why I say, especially when you're younger, the biggest risk you can take is not taking any risks at all,
Mhm.
because you have kind of built-in flexibility. You have more time. You
That's
don't
true.
have maybe the house or the 3 kids, and not that you can't take the risk then. It's just going to be a little bit more of a calculated risk versus if you have that more of that flexibility.
It's funny because, like you said, there's a stage in your life when it's easier to take risks, right? And then you kind of get this stage of your life where it's a little bit tougher. But then again, at least I found when I get to this stage, it's
Yeah.
easier again,
Yeah.
which again, I wouldn't have predicted that, but
Yeah.
it's true. So anyway, so let's get to the new book. I loved this title when I heard this. Listen to Your Day, the life-changing practice of paying attention. Oh my gosh. So what motivated you to write that?
Same motivation, feeling like I was really failing and struggling at focus, at losing focus, at my inability to really pay attention to what I said was important.
Hmm.
And I would say, well, of course, my family is the most important, or my work as an author, or, my faith is the most important. And yet, if you're looking at my time spent and what I'm really focusing my choice attention to,
Hmm.
it is not to these things.
Hmm.
And really it's mostly to my phone. If you look at just the time breakout of my day, my phone is telling me I'm spending 4, 5, 6 hours a day staring at it. And would I say my phone is the most important part of my life? No, it's not. So, and then I was just really struggling at even writing, reading a book.
Hmm.
I just
Hmm.
felt like I was losing that ability
Hmm.
because my brain and my habits were really being rewired. And so I just felt like, man, I got to do something about this. I got to research
Hmm.
about this. I got to
Hmm.
write about this. I got to think about this. And really, I got to pay attention to this problem. And I think it's such an important topic because I really think there's a battle going on for our attention. Your attention is money. Your time is money, more so than ever. We're really in a currency of attention. And if something has your attention, they can make money off of that.
I was going to
And
ask you
so
about that phrase because I
yeah,
saw that you talk about that in your book. I mean, the currency of attention.
yeah.
That's
And
really
it's
oh,
built into the phrase,
yeah.
pay attention. We really have
I didn't think about it that way.
that transactional effect taking place. And so you are making investments with your attention. You are paying your time. And it's like most of us are, we're walking out the front door and we just have 20s in our pocket and we're just throwing them around. Whoever wants one, just take it. I don't really know. Just as long as it distracts me for 5 minutes, here, take my money. And that's kind of how we are interacting with our attention online. Um, and it's also, what am I in debt to with my attention? So not only what am I investing in, but also what am I in debt to
Hmm.
with my attention? What am I spending my choice attention? Because really I'm indebted to that. And whatever we're focusing on, we're also becoming. That's really what is infiltrating our minds, our hearts. That's what we are focused on throughout the day. That's making our decisions for us. And so it's like, do I want to be in debt to the things that I'm spending most of my time paying attention to? And so I think these are important questions for all of us to ask of, am I living an intentional life with attention? We talk about self-discipline a lot in many categories. And I think attention is really one of those categories. It's a discipline. It's a habit of, I need to build a habit of intentional attention. And where am I placing that?
Mm. So I have to ask you what's an important question for me, and that is about Frederick Buechner. And for those of people who are not familiar with Frederick Buechner, one of the titles of one of his books was Listening to Your Life, right? And one of his quotes that I'm going to do a poor job of paraphrasing was basically, he said something along the lines of, there's one thing that you should listen to all the stuff I've been written, it's pay attention.
Huh,
So again, when I saw the title of your book, I thought, oh my gosh, this guy's got it. He's really, today's version of Frederick Buechner. I thought,
well,
I got to meet Paul.
well, I wish I would have found that quote, or I haven't even read that book. I've read Frederick Buechner's work, and we were talking before. It was his work. It was some of the most transformational for me, especially the book Telling the Truth.
Yeah.
Which is the Gospels, comedy, fairy tale. What's the other one? Comedy, fairy tale.
Comedy, tragedy, and fairy tale.
Tragedy and fairy tale. There you go. Which for me, when I was going through a kind of a crisis of faith and really kind of struggling with that question in my 20s, again, another aspect of life that I think we wrestle with a lot. That was a really important one for me because I felt like it was just the honesty and the beauty and the hard stuff and the funny stuff, and just getting that all there and telling the truth. I was really struggling with feeling like I felt I was feeling at that time like church is really not telling the truth to me. It's really not grappling with all aspects of the gospel, from a faith perspective. So that's why I really appreciated that. I actually I wrote a list called, I think it was like 27 books every 20 something should read. And I put that book on there, and I didn't have there's not a ton of faith oriented books on that list. It's a mix of all kinds of books, but that was one that I was like, I think everybody, and especially 20 something should read. So
yeah. When I was basically leading the Frederick Buechner Center, we would donate copies of some of his books to seminaries each year. And, I'd give them, here's a series of different books, which one, a lot of them would pick, Telling the Truth, just because they believed that would really resonate with their students. And, his analogies that he puts into that book are really powerful.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, it's really poetic. I mean, it's just such a mixture. It's not your typical self-help Christian book. It's really more of a story and a poem and just everything that he's kind of weaving in there. It's a beautiful book. So I've interacted with Frederick Buechner or whoever's managing his Twitter account. It could have been you.
I ran it for several years. I don't now, but I did for several years.
We might have been interacting through Frederick Buechner's page and not knowing it.
So I'd like to read from one of the endorsements for your book. This is from Jonathan Pakluda. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but he's a best-selling author and host of Becoming Something podcast and a lead pastor at a church. He says, listen to your day is going to help you clean your thinking and find a peace that you didn't know was possible. Paul Angone addresses one of the biggest problems of our day. If you have a smartphone in your pocket, you would be smart to read this book again and again. So can you talk a little bit more about what he's referring to as the biggest problem of our day?
Yeah, it really is that I think we're losing the battle for our attention. And in that, I think we're living such noisy, distracted lives, and we feel like something's missing, and yet we don't know quite how to change things or quite how to get back on track to, I don't feel like I'm really doing what I want to do with my life, or I feel really anxious and fragmented. I don't feel like I'm living kind of this whole life from a place of peace and joy and rest, I've kind of lost that rootedness. And so that's why I wrote this book, Listen to Your Day. It's kind of twofold. It's one, what are the distractions that are keeping us from really paying attention to our day? So I talk about, obviously the smartphone, and how that's become really our reflex response. So any kind of down moment, any bored moment, uncomfortable moment, any a red light, a line, or whatever it is, I'm going to instantly, that's my reflex response, where I'm going to pull this out and I'm going to look at anything, something, just anything to fill that void, that time, that space. So it's all the distractions with that. But then on the flip side, it's then what are you taking in through all these platforms and media, all the noise, all the messages that's coming at you, but then also what are you missing out of when you're not listening to your day, when you're not listening to the revelation and the insight, the ideas, the things that are coming at us every day that we have to be consciously aware of. We have to be paying attention to these for us to hear and see them. And so that's kind of where the book, it's kind of in those two ways, trying to get away from the distractions. How do we do that? And then how do we start being more intentional with the ways that we're paying attention throughout our day?
So in the book, you talk about some of the instances where you kind of like were influenced by paying attention. What were some of those specifics?
Yeah, I mean, I talk about, even different habits that I've been building since I've been writing the book. So now I do a 45-minute walk/hike during my workday. That's scheduled in. I do that no matter what, unless something crazy comes up. And so that is a time where I don't listen to anything. I'm not listening to a podcast or music. I'm just taking that walk. And there's tons of psychological studies that are showing that if you go out in nature and walk for 30 minutes, that's going to do more for your mental health, emotional health. It lessens anxiety. It helps with depression. It helps with all these different things. Also for me, it's one of the most productive 45 minutes of my day. It really is, because I'm getting, I often say aha moments. They don't happen by accident. Aha moments don't happen by accident. They happen in those spaces in our day where we are at peace or at rest or we're quiet. That's why people often say I get my best ideas in the shower.
Yeah.
It's this relaxing time where you're not filled with noise and your mind is subconsciously working on solving problems. From a faith perspective, that might be the time where you're able to hear what the Lord has been trying to tell you all day, but finally you've quieted down enough to be able to hear that message. And so for me, when I take that hike, that's when I'm doing my best writing. I'm getting my best ideas when I'm out walking. So it's really, I'm living the life of a writer. Especially being a writer, it's more of a lifestyle. It's something you live by just actively paying attention and protecting those spaces to do so, versus I'm just going to sit at a computer. I'm going to grind out 2 hours worth of stuff, whatever it is. No, it's more, I do my best writing in those moments that I've kind of set out and protected to be able to have that process take place.
Back in my business life, I used to take a lot of international flights where, it was basically hours on end when you were disconnected. This was the days before, Wi-Fi on the plane and things like that. Sure. And I found the same kind of thing. Once I got that separated for, in that case, that long of a time. It really caused me to, generate some of the best thinking that I had during those years. So
yeah,
it's kind of an interesting
exactly.
phenomenon.
And we're losing that, and we're losing that ability and those spaces because it's hard for those ideas to break through so much noise and distraction. And so we really have to be intentional about building some of those spaces into our life. And it doesn't have to be monumental. It doesn't have to be an hour hike. It could just be 5 minutes in your car. It could be choosing to take a bath. It could be gardening out in the backyard. These moments, things that you enjoy, working with your hands, doing some kind of action in a place that you love is good for your emotional, spiritual, physical, mental health. So that's great. but it's also just a great time of what psychologists call the incubation effect, where, you have these kind of problems and things that you're trying to solve. And when you move away from it and you do something that you enjoy, they call it the incubation effect, where then you're finding the answers to that problem that you couldn't figure out when you were sitting in the
Yeah,
meeting or at your
yeah,
computer.
yeah. Isn't that crazy how our minds work that way? So you've also written about what you define as obsessive comparison disorder and obsessive connection disorder. What are those?
Yeah, that's I'm not trying to make light of obsessive compulsive disorder, but it really is trying to point to, I think, how severe the issue is getting in the sense of really our social media and smartphone addictions. And and if I ask somebody, who spends 30 minutes on Instagram or Facebook, 45 minutes, kind of the time gets away from you, you're just scrolling infinitely, just looking at stuff, who leaves that experience and says to themselves, that was a great use of my time. Like, like I feel so much better about my life. Like I feel confident, I feel secure, feel ready to tackle my problems. I don't think many people leave that experience feeling that way. And so that's why I kind of landed on this obsessive comparison and obsessive connection disorder, in the sense that we're obsessively connecting to something through our phone,
Mhm.
which in turn is actually leaving us very disconnected from the lives that we're living in our day to day, from our, meaningful relationships that we're having. We're spending 5 times connecting with everybody around the world through social media. And then we might spend, 3 minutes in passing with our spouse as we're running around, and barely talking. So I think we've really, it's becoming very disaligned with how much time we're doing that. And then the amount of comparison taking place. We've always compared ourselves to others. Used to compare yourself to the Jones next door or whatever, who has the bigger house, who has the bigger car, whatever it might be. Well, now we have a global
Yeah,
comparison game
yeah,
that's instantaneous.
yeah.
Um, I often say you used to have to go to your 10 or 20-year reunion to look everybody up and down to see, okay, who's doing better than whom, who's successful. But you just had to fake it for one night, you know, lose some weight, get a toupee, like rent the BMW, like whatever it took to trick everybody, right? I'm doing amazing. And then you could go back to your real life the next day because nobody would know. Now we're trying to pull off that same phenomenon with every post, with everything we're sharing. And it's just this constant comparison trap that's taking place, this obsessive comparison, which then is isolating us. And it's really blocking true connection because it seems like everybody's doing better than me. So I don't want to share about my struggles. I don't want to share about my problems. I don't want to have an open conversation with that friend because I don't want to look like the one failure out of the group, and so it's becoming a very isolating, lonely generation
Mhm.
that is connected globally. So it's a strange paradox taking place.
So let's say that, a person's been successful in paying attention. What then do you have in terms of recommendations for what you do about it?
Yeah, and that's the beauty of, really the book, my new book, Listen to Your Day, is that one, it's meant to be written in, it's kind of
Mm,
it's
mm,
part workbook, so it's not about me trying to give somebody the answers. I'm just trying to give somebody a framework and a lens and practices and habits so that they can start finding the answers for themselves. And so even at the tail end of the book, I talk about different, what I call mindset models that people can practice for different ways of paying attention to their day.
mm,
And then they can write all their ideas, revelation, what they're seeing. I'm really guiding them through a
mm,
process of, okay, so like, very fitting to this podcast, I have the writer's mindset model, so how do you think like a writer? And I kind of lay that out. Here's what a writer is doing. Here's what a writer is paying attention to. Today, I want you to think like a writer, and then I want you to write it all down. When you get that insight, when you get that idea, I want you to make note of it right away in the book. And I think you'll be amazed at then what you find, what you see, what you're actually hearing throughout the day, but maybe you just didn't take that time to write it down. Or you thought, I'll remember this later. This is such a great idea. Of course, I'll remember it, when I have time to write it down. And then it's like, well, you forget it because you didn't take that time. So I have these different, I have the entrepreneurial mindset model, investigator, consultant, farmer, monk, just again, these different ways of, these people look at their day through a different lens. So how do we bring and incorporate some of those elements? It's almost like role playing so that you can then practice different ways. And I think you'll all be amazed at then what you start seeing, what you start pulling out from your day. You're like, wow, I can't believe all this stuff was here all the time. I just wasn't seeing it. I wasn't paying attention to it.
Excellent. So what is there anything else about the book that you'd like people to know about?
I just think this is an important conversation worth paying attention to. It's funny that I'm trying to raise my hand and say, hey, pay attention to this, as I'm saying, everybody's clamoring for your attention. But I think we really do need to reclaim our attention, and I think I can't think of a much more important topic and something that we need to start talking about, because it's really going to, it's just going to halt so many things in your life, your progress into your calling, your purpose, your relationships. So much of it is dictated by what you're paying attention to. And the most successful and fulfilled people, I believe, in this world have really built the habit and practice of paying attention to what's important to them. They've really learned how to narrow their focus. They're not looking at everything and being distracted by all these different things. Experts, people that are really thriving, have just really built that ability to narrow their focus on things that are truly important to them. And then they're able to take those action steps, and they want to keep doing something about that because it's meaningful and it's rich, and it builds that compounding interest. Again, as we pay attention, it's building the compounding interest, where now you're building that investment of, I'm paying attention to this thing and now I'm growing it. And so I think it's such an important conversation that's only going to be more dire and difficult, as technology gets more progressive and more advanced, more invasive. Right now this phone is just in our pocket, but as we progress to now, it's on our, our skin, we're wearing it as a watch. Now it's glasses. Now it's my windshield. Now it's Meta. It's this whole digital world. As it gets more and more advanced, it's going to be harder and harder to really reclaim our attention. So I think it's such an important topic for all of us to pay attention to.
I've told people for a few years now that we're going to have chips inside our brains before we know it.
Probably to have more an advanced experience.
Yeah. We'll be connected to the internet medically.
Yeah.
Which, the good news and bad news, right? I mean,
sure.
But, people look at me like I'm crazy when I say that. But I thought and the medical industry is already driving us there for monitoring purposes, right? How many people have pacemakers already?
Yeah,
sure. It's been going on forever. So, and now with Fitbit and things like that, it's getting more into monitoring. Well, anyway, it'll go further, but we'll see how that plays out.
Exactly.
So looking forward, are there any other future books or projects that you're able to talk about at this point?
Sure. Well, we were talking about before the call, I have a fiction book that I've written. I'm mainly known as a nonfiction author, but I had this dream 10 years ago, and I woke up in the middle of the night, had never had this happen before, and I literally just got up and wrote down 3 pages.
Wow.
It was like I had this download of the whole arc of a story, of the character, the name, the friends. I mean, it was wild. And so, but I never felt like I could get to that book. I was always trying to grow other things, but a few summers ago I had time and I wrote this book down, and it's called Fanny. That's the name. And Fanny is a high school boy, and that's his nickname he's been given his whole life. And so he's kind of this outcast. He's overweight. He's really kind of seen as, no one's paying attention to Fanny, but he loves opera music. And his hero is Pavarotti. But he's too afraid to sing in public, so he's got this amazing voice, but he can't let it out because he's always kind of believed this lie that he's a mistake, that he's just, the moment he was born, he was just an accident. So it's really a story about him
Uh,
coming to terms with with that feeling of, I have a purpose, I have an identity, I have a real name. His real name is Francis. And what does that mean? And so, and then can he get up on stage? And that's what it's building towards. Can
wow.
he get up on stage? And so, uh, I love the fiction side of things because you're able to bring in truth through a different way, through an
Exactly.
emotional way, and it was a really fun way to do as a nonfiction author to get immersed in fiction where your story is coming to life, and you're just kind of trying to catch up to it, as it moves in front of you. And so hopefully someday that book or that movie or both will be available to the masses. That's what I'm trying to. That'll be my next step is figuring out where does that go.
Well, we'll look forward to that. I mean, that's very, very intriguing and interesting. So, well, Paul, thanks so much for joining us and for all the work that you've done. Really appreciate it. And again, the title is Listen to Your Day, the life-changing practice of paying attention. And you can learn more at allgrownup.com, allgrownup.com. Thanks so much, Paul.
Thanks, Brian.